Now, I'm going to show you how to use the 4 boxes and then lead it into a conversation of the red lens and the green lens. But the thing I want you to know is this, that when you do it this way, 4 boxes and then red lens and green lens, do it in a longer seminar, because if you don't, people will think that the red lens is a thing rather than a distinction. And I've heard this before in talks with groups that I've worked with. After a while, someone will say something to someone else, and the person says, "Oh, you're red lensing me," which of course is not really true. They're red lensing the other person for red lensing them, but that's a whole other conversation. But it's like you don't want people talking about the red lens. You just want them seeing it as a distinction. Okay? And so the best way to do it is within a longer seminar where you can really say to people time and again, you know, you heard me say the red lens before, but we're not even going to be looking at this. You can even tear it up in front of people, okay? Because really what's important here is the green lens. So I'm not also going to give you the long version of the 4 boxes, because you can see that in the other video that I do, which is an extended version. I'm just going to kind of go through fast motion, and then I'll slow down when it comes to the lenses. Got it? Good. So let's say that there's a way in which the brain creates its own picture of reality, its own experience of reality. And this model will show how that works. And interestingly enough, it has 4 boxes, and so we call it the 4-box model. And I say it like that, SLP, is because sometimes people laugh when you do that. You don't have to do that if you're not comfortable, all right? But the reason I do that is because I want people to laugh a little bit, just kind of lighten up about this. So first, in the first box, we put conclusion. And what that means is that our brain is always, that is a C, folks. Okay, that is a C. Our brain is always looking for a way to understand reality. And at this point, SLPers, what I'd like you to do is think of a time for yourself. I say this in the other tape. Think of a time for yourself when you didn't know what was going on, like me and the whiteout with skiing, because, and then you ask them to think of a time when they didn't know what was happening and how it made them feel. You see, because you're having people relate to what you're talking about. So the minute we form a particular conclusion and we're interested in it, our brain automatically, like a Google search engine, begins to give us evidence to prove that our conclusion is correct. This is a tactic of survival, because when we were living in caves 100,000 years ago, because of our 100,000-year-old brain, we didn't have fangs or fur, and we couldn't run very fast. But what we did have was a brain that could make sense of the danger surrounding it. First, looking for danger, because if we didn't look for danger first, we might be the victim of a predator. So always looking for danger first before looking for a reward. And you know, our brain is like that today, 100,000 years later. If you'll notice, every time you're trying to do something new or different, your brain is going to talk to you about how this is bad. Something bad is going to happen. More about that later. It's very important for the brain that its conclusions are correct, because that's a threat to its survival. So we are really locked in to our evidence, all right? Our evidence creates a condition within which we behave. It's like stimulus here, response here. How I behave. How I behave. Now, the interesting thing about this is that the brain doesn't see the difference between things that it creates inside for itself and external reality. That's one of the reasons you see Olympic players sometimes close their eyes, meditate, and go through the motions of what it is they're going to be doing before they actually do the act. That's because the brain doesn't know the difference between seeing it this way and actually practicing it in physical reality. So this is to say that our brain is very sensitive to what it is we are proving correct, and our behavior is a way of saying, yes, I'm going to behave in a way that is correct, and it's correct because my conclusion says it is correct. So, very interesting. If you thought that you will be known by the evidence you've been gathering in life, because your evidence is going to show how you behave, it's a pretty sobering thought. What would it be like if you were to pick the conclusions that were important to you, gathering evidence for those, and allowing that evidence to influence your behavior? That's a wonderful, wonderful way of seeing how you have the capability of pointing your brain in the direction you choose. You and I don't have control over our thoughts. We don't have control over our feelings, really. I mean, think of all the times you've tried to control your thoughts or feelings. Does it really work? You know it doesn't. However, and this is the most important, this is the most powerful thing a person can see in their whole life, that you and I have the ability to shift the focus of our brain in the direction we want it to be focused. So if, for example, you were to be gathering evidence for how something's wrong with this situation, you know your behavior is going to conform to that. But what if you were to say, you know, I am going to look for evidence of what is going right in this situation? Can you see how you could begin to train your brain to focus on what's going right? That's all. Not the actual thoughts, but looking at what's going right. What's happening in this situation that I actually like versus not like? Incidentally, in leadership, this is something that when you teach leaders how to do, it really forms the basis of the feedback that they give to others. For example, instead of in a performance review of talking about what the employee did wrong, looking at what the employee did that was right, and encouraging them to bring the rest of their behavior up to that level. You see, knowing that they're capable of performing to an excellent level, why not point to the evidence for their excelling, for their doing something that's right? Because when you do, I say to leaders, it shifts how you behave in front of them. You're not seen as a threat. As a matter of fact, the person can relax in front of you. And we all know that when a person relaxes, they're more open to feedback. They're more open to taking feedback and putting it into their lives. Because how you and I behave sets the table for how others behave. So in other words, how I behave becomes the stimulus for how others behave. So we've got stimulus response here. We've got stimulus response here. And of course, when people behave in accordance with our conclusion, it strengthens the conclusion, doesn't it? Strengthens the conclusion. And this can work both ways. And so I want to show you how this can work both ways and what we're going to be looking at today. All right? So let's take this a step further. And before I do this, SLPers, I'm going to ask my buddy Jeremy to hand me the green lens card so that I can be absolutely perfect in the way I say it. I mean, yes, I know I developed the thing, but doesn't mean that I always remember exactly how it goes. Perfect. So it's okay with you to use a cue like this, especially if you say to people, and this is really a trick I learned a long time ago, and I suggest you could use it anytime. If ever you have to hold a cue card up for anything, you can say to people, I have this cue card because I want to make sure that I give this to you. I give you all the information that I want to give you. Boom! It handles it. So they see why you're doing it. They see that you're not trying to hide it. They see that you're not nervous, you know, even if you might be nervous, but you're not. They don't. You're providing certainty. Always certainty, certainty. Many of you have already learned from me and are going to learn even more about certainty, clarity, structure, and relationship. Certainty is the most important thing you can create ever. So now I'm going to go back. Good. So let's say that conclusions act like a lens, right? It's a way of seeing things. And so let's say that this is us. This is us from outer space as an alien. No. So let's say this is another person. Now, let's say that we're having a difficult day. We might be hungry. We might be tired. Whatever reason, right? Stressed out. We might say that what happens is that a red lens forms itself in front of us. Now, a lens, like this red, a lens is not really red. It's just that it's pushing away every other color and only letting red in. Do you see how that's like a conclusion? I'm not looking at any other evidence. I'm only letting in evidence to prove that my conclusion is correct. So think about this, if you've ever had this, okay? Because if you're like me, I have had this numerous times in this lens. I begin gathering evidence for there is something wrong with this person. Have you ever gathered evidence for that? Of course you have. Come on. I want to see all of you raising your hands, because come on, you're normal like everybody else. This is part of our brain, all right? Number two, This person does not their own answers. In other words, sometimes we say they don't have a clue. They don't have a clue. I know that you as well as I have had this in our own lives, you know. That's one of the reasons that we start giving people advice. 3, I do have their answers. And it's up to me to give them the answers. Or another way we can look at this is fix them. Sound familiar? Breathe. Everybody keep breathing. And this is something that when we start gathering evidence for this, this is probably the most disempowering conclusion we can gather evidence for. I don't think they are committed. You know, you can say, I doubt their commitment, but a more direct thing is, I don't think they're committed. I don't think they're committed to the job, the workplace. I don't think they're committed to being successful. Do you see how we do that? And the interesting thing is that the most difficult thing for another person to hear is that you don't think they're committed. Why? Because what's true about people is that they are committed. They truly are. If they're not successful in life, it's not because they're not committed to success. Truly, it's because they don't have some success skill sets. So they can become discouraged. But you see, if I see that they're not committed, they're not, I doubt their motivation. Put that one, I doubt their motivation. It's another way of looking at the 4-box model, how am I going to behave in front of them? What is it going to look like if I give a performance review, if I give some important feedback, when I'm talking about someone, about their life, when I'm talking about with a teenager, for example, about why they're coming in late at night when they promised not to come in late. Boy, this is the thing that really gets people and disempowers them. And then finally, this person is a drain on me. In other words, this person drains my energy, just sucks it out of me. I don't even want to be around that person because the minute I really feel like all my energy is being drained. Does that sound familiar? If it does, and I hope it does, because if it does, then you are awake to the general problem that we all have in interacting with other people, especially when we're under stress, we're tired, we're hungry. This is what our brain automatically goes to. You could put this all under the label of threat. They are a threat to me in some way, even a threat to my sanity, a threat to my ability to lead, a threat to my ability to manage, a threat to my ability to be a good parent. Do you see? The red lens has this kind of a threat aura around it. So we call this the red lens. Red lens. Now, I would like you to, right now, stand up and pair up with someone in this room who you haven't met yet and have a chat for literally 2 minutes. Not 2 minutes each, just 2 minutes. I'll give you 2.5 minutes, okay? Does this sound familiar to you? Just look at it, all right? Please let it sound familiar to you, okay? Great. You'll notice that I was segueing back and forth with the audience, okay? And that's important. You don't like have a 2-minute share or 2.5-minute share and talk with people about in a moment we'll have a 2-minute share. That structure is deadening, you know. What is really good is looking out in the audience. For example, you could have gotten with the red lens, I doubt their commitment. I doubt that they're committed, right? Or I don't think they're committed. That's the way I put it there, which I like better than I doubt that they're committed. I don't think they're committed, you know. If I noticed that the group was getting a little tired, because they often do when I talk about the red lens, at that point, have them stand up and pair up with someone real quick, like that. You say to them, pair. I'm going to give you about 2.5 minutes. Think about times in which you may have had this conclusion about someone, not in which you have had this conclusion, in which you may have had. Why? Once again, the conditional tense gets under monkey mind and allows them to begin to relate. Well, I may have had this time and like that. And they can get into it more easily, especially if they don't know you very well. Is that clear? So I know that your mentor is going to work with you in how to segue in and out. Remembering the bottom line is it's not what I need to say in the moment, it's what other people out there in front of me need to hear. It's not what I need to do in the moment, it's what other people, you know, the people in my seminar need to do. Do I see they need to stand up and find someone and relate? It's for making this relevant, but it's also for getting their energy going. Got it? Good. Now we're going to go to the green lens, right? And this is how we say it. We just got finished looking at the red lens. And yes, I think we can all find ourselves in one or more of those 5 different conclusions, yes? Let's look at something else though, something that is more empowering, something that sets the table, if you wish, for success. It creates an environment in which trust can emerge, right? Because trust emerges when someone has the experience that you see who they really are and hear who they really are. Now, that's a very general, see who they really are. It's very general. But here, we're going to break that down into 5 conclusions. So every time you hear the words, who you really are, I want you to think of the 5 conclusions But when you talk about trust, SLPers, you can say trust occurs when the other person sees that you have something to offer, sees that you have something to contribute, is happy to see you, and is open to relating with you in a very empowering way. So you see the words I'm using. Get as specific as possible, because the truth is that the green lens, SLPers, really does engender trust. So enough of this kind of preamble. I'm going to go right into this without interruption. Okay? Well, we've seen what happens when we're maybe tired or hungry or under stress, and the kinds of conclusions that we gather evidence for, and we see that it's not that empowering at all. And you heard me say earlier that while we don't have control over our thoughts and even our behavior, we do have control over where we want our brain to focus. In other words, the conclusions that we are really interested in. And I'm going to give you some conclusions which, if you are interested in focusing upon them, will create trust. And trust occurs when another human being sees that you know that they have a contribution to make, that you are treating them with dignity and respect. And so let's go into this, because I want to show you exactly how you can make that happen. So we just looked at a way of seeing things, a way of seeing people that is not very empowering, and usually occurs when we are under stress or we're hungry or we're tired ourselves. Let's look at something else, which, if you are willing to shift the focus of your attention onto these conclusions, will create the sense of trust. Now, trust occurs when another human being sees and experiences that you see that they have something to offer, that they have something to contribute to you or some other place in the organization or with people in general, and that they see that you are treating them with dignity and respect. So let's look at how that can happen. Okay? So in this instance, we have you or me. And we have the other person. And believe it or not, it could be the same person. Now, in this case, we have what we would call a green lens in front of us. It's just a metaphor to describe the differences. All right? Now, I am going to actually hold a card up to talk with you about this, because I want to make sure that I get all of the words correctly. Now, SLPers, it really is okay for you to say that right in the middle. And you're saying it with certainty so that everyone relaxes and they know why you're holding the card, okay? Good. So let's look at the green lens. Number one, this person is a hero, whole and complete. Now, you'll notice that these 5 conclusions are quite different than the red lens conclusions. I took them from looking at the lives of people who either currently are or at least were inspirational leaders, people who, around whom others felt empowered, felt there was a sense of possibility and promise. Each one of you, right now, I know you have people in your own life who inspired you in some way. So, as you hear me do this, look at these qualities and see if you can attach them onto a few of the leaders who may have guided you along your hero's journey, all right? So this person is a hero, whole and complete. That comes from the work of Joseph Campbell, who was a very brilliant scholar. He wrote a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. He was also the mentor for George Lucas and the Star Wars trilogy, the original trilogy. And George Lucas actually said that if it weren't for Joseph Campbell's mentoring, Star Wars would never have gotten off the ground. So that's really a significant thing to see. And you'll see that the Star Wars trilogy, for example, is all about the hero and the hero's journey. And Joseph Campbell said, the extent to which you and I can see ourselves as heroes in our own journey is the extent to which we have a sense of meaning and possibility in our own lives. The second is, this person has goals and dreams. And a desire to make a difference. The person who I think of in this vein was Mother Teresa, who opened up her mission in Calcutta, working with people who were so poor and disadvantaged. What she wanted to do is allow these people at least once before they passed away to have the experience that someone saw that they were a contribution, that they made a difference in someone's life. And that's what she based her whole ministry on. Now, for us here, the extent to which you can recognize that the person in front of you, just like you, has goals. They have dreams. And they want to make a difference. Do you see how empowering that is? Research shows that when employees stay for a long period of time in any corporation, it's not necessarily because they're earning a lot of money, but it's because they see that their presence makes a difference. They are relevant to what's going on, because that is the main driver of people's involvement and behavior, knowing that I make a difference here. So can you imagine how empowering it is if you were to be gathering evidence for this? Number 3, this person has their own answers. I got this from looking at the lives of teachers who are well known for producing students who excel in what they do. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Stand and Deliver. It's one of the most motivating films I've ever seen, about one teacher's ability to motivate a bunch of students in a, quote, disadvantaged neighborhood to excel in, I believe it was in math contests. Many teachers, great teachers, they will say, you know, I don't teach my students anything. I create the environment for them to learn on their own, for their own mastery to emerge. Next. This person is contributing to me right now. You see how 4 is related to 2. You see, this person has goals and dreams and a desire to make a difference or contribute, and this person is contributing to me right now. I took this from the life of Nelson Mandela, for whom other people were the contribution. I don't know if you've seen Invictus. If you haven't, I suggest you see it, because in that movie throughout, it was never about him being the person of stature and the person in control. It was always him finding how each person contributed to him personally. And as a matter of fact, when he was in prison for 27 years, every 3 months or so, they had to bring in different jailers because they started liking him after 3 months. And I think it's because he saw what a contribution they were. And then finally, this person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. I got that from the Dalai Lama, for whom everyone is the Buddha. In other words, there's the Buddha nature in everyone. And you see in all of his writings and all of his talks how he is respectful and treats whatever he's talking about with dignity. So, thinking for yourself, what would it be like for you to be treating people with dignity and respect? What would that look like in your behavior? Because you see, if we go back to the 4 boxes, and our behavior is the direct reflection of the different conclusions that we have, and the evidence that we're gathering to support the conclusion, then our behavior will be the direct result of the evidence that we're finding interesting, and people will relate to us accordingly. So these are basically the 5 building blocks for trust. If you were to take these and write them down and laminate them and carry them with you, I think you'll discover miracles in how you relate to people. Now, when I say miracle, I'm very, very clear about the definition of miracle from Willa Cather, which is miracles rest not so much upon healing power coming suddenly near us from afar, but upon our perceptions being made clearer, so that for the moment our eyes can see and our ears can hear what has been there around us always. What if you discovered that this has been there around you always? Would that be a miracle? Would that transform your life? Well, if you are willing to look at this daily, I say that within the next 90 days, you will see a transformation in your life. The green lens. Now, let me say to you exactly what I mean by transformation. and distinguish it from change. When you change something, there's always the possibility that you could change back. So if you change one or two thoughts that you have and work on really hard trying to change the thoughts, you might be able to do it, but there's always the sense that you're going to change back into the other way of thinking. Transformation is very interesting because transformation says that once you see something, you cannot unsee it. Once you see something, you know, for example, if you had never seen the color green before and you were seeing it now, you'd probably never be able to unsee it. You'd begin looking for examples of green. So I invite you to treat this as that sort of an exercise, that you become interested in gathering evidence for people out of this lens and join the hundreds of thousands of people who already are. Thanks. Now, you have the standard version of the red lens, don't you? Absolutely. You saw me adding some words, yes? That's because the red lens is inside of me so much that at some point I might add something as a way of clarification. You have it be exactly the way it is as we talk about the red lens, right? So that's number one. The second question people might have has to do with, I often say that I derived these from da 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 da. It's easy just to say these were derived from, okay? You don't have to cite Maria Nema, da, 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 what, no. These were derived from looking at, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, if people ask after the seminar who derived these and stuff, you could say, well, you know, the author, the founder of this model. But people probably won't ask you, you see, because that's like such a little thing for them. The most important thing, though, is that you just simply, with certainty, these were derived from looking at the lives of. And the interesting thing about this is that they can read about Joseph Campbell. They can read about Mother Teresa. They know about great teachers. You know, they could even see Stand and Deliver. This is something that if they saw Invictus or if they look at the life of Nelson Mandela, that would be easy. And finally, this is something, you know, the Dalai Lama is known for treating people with dignity and respect. So you could say to people, you could even Google talks by the Dalai Lama and watch how he is treating a subject. You'll see that he's obviously treating people and the subject matter with dignity and respect. So this is not something that is way out there. It's kind of so obvious and simple. The other thing I want you to know about things that are obvious and simple, very often those are the most powerful principles. When they're obvious and simple, when your eyes can see and your ears can hear what has been there around you always. And people are always looking for these complicated, incredibly deep, meaning heavy and serious principles. And all the wisdom teachers talk about in simplicity is the power. If something is so complicated that you can barely understand it, you might look at whether or not the author of whatever it is really knew what they were talking about. Because in my own life, over these 50 years, I saw that if I couldn't explain something simply, I didn't know what I was talking about. So I had to go back and study a little bit and make sure that what I was talking about is worth talking about, number one, and how can I say this in fewer sentences? I learned this when I was writing my books. How do I keep sentences short and sweet and yet powerful? But please just know that people will see things, even like the 4 boxes. And if they look at the 4 boxes without hearing your explanation, they might say, this is not rocket science. It is rocket science in the sense that the principles you're pointing to have lasting value that people can use for themselves over and over again. So as you are being warriors for transformation, just know that these questions are going to come up continually. And you can often say, well, I remember how I used to think these were too simple. And then I started applying them to my own life. And wow, it really made a difference. And here I am, years later. I'm having the time of my life. I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing. And I can relate it all back to the point at which I started taking these principles and putting them into my life. Got it? Thanks.